Hello, I am Andy. It is March 12th, 2023. The spring is nearby everywhere. Today, I will guide you to Yangpyeong, near Seoul. Yangpyeong is an ecological city close to Seoul, and is a favorite place for many Seoul citizens, because of its beautiful natural scenery. Today's topic is about what we need to keep an eye on in the Korean economy and real estate sector in 2023 year. It is three aspects of Korea: economic and real estate parts, things to watch in South Korea in 2023. First is economic deceleration. Rising borrowing costs and erosion of real household income will usher in a credit crunch in South Korea in 2023. Household debt default will rise owing to broad links to the property market, but this will not lead to systemic disruption to financial stability. The second point is the government will be forced into U-turns and delays in its fiscal consolidation efforts and tax and labor policy reforms, owing to greater public resistance amid worsening economic conditions. The third point is the resumption of nuclear weapons testing by North Korea will freeze inter-Korean relations, raising the risk of military confrontation and hastening South Korea's steps to deepen defense ties with the US and mend relations with Japan. I'd like to talk to you about each of these areas as I drive. The year 2023 will present a difficult economic, political and geopolitical terrain for South Korea's political and business leaders to navigate. As the post-pandemic economic resurgence draws to an end, South Korean manufacturers will need to adjust to falling overseas orders, and households will have to make tough budgeting decisions as both living and borrowing costs rise. Although safe from any electoral challenges until the next presidential election in 2027, the government led by President Yoon Suk-yeol will find itself increasingly embroiled in intra-party feuds, inter-party confrontations, and, more worryingly, rising public discontent, all pointing to worsening policy gridlock. The international environment will bring no respite. We expect North Korea to resume nuclear weapons testing in 2023, which will throw inter-Korean relations into disarray and sharply raise the risk of military confrontation in the region. EIU expects a sharp weakening in South Korea's economic momentum in 2023, as we forecast real GDP expansion to decelerate to 1.5% from an estimated 2.6% in 2022. This is lower than the consensus forecast of 2.1% growth for 2023. The slowdown will result partly from global economic deceleration and a decline in global trade. The resulting slump in production will force export-oriented manufacturing companies to lay off excess workers and constrain wage growth. Headwinds on the domestic front will be no less severe. Rising interest rates, along with persistently strong increases in consumer prices, will force many households to cut back spending on non-essential goods and services. The combination of rising borrowing costs and falling household disposable income creates a challenging situation for any economy, but the pain will be particularly acute for South Korea owing to elevated private sector debt in the country. According to the Bank for International Settlements, household debt in South Korea amounted to 105.4% of GDP at the end of the first quarter of 2022. With non-financial corporations' liabilities equivalent to 115.2% of GDP. Both figures were higher than the average levels of advanced economies and emerging market economies. Household debt will be of particular concern owing to its link to the property market. The Bank of Korea (BOK), the central bank, reports that 78.5% of outstanding household loans have a floating rate and that mortgage loans account for 59.6% of total loans to households, leaving these liabilities highly vulnerable to increasing interest rates and a price correction in the housing market. As we expect property prices to drop in 2023 as a result of tightening credit conditions and decreasing transactions, the number of mortgage defaults will rise, adding further downward pressure to the property market. Higher borrowing rates will also squeeze disposable income and hurt the ability to make consumer credit repayment. By comparison, corporate debt serviceability will be of less risk, owing largely to many large and medium-sized companies' stable revenue flows. However, the credit risk will not be felt evenly. Small businesses that are less capable of absorbing rising operational costs, and companies that have a highly leveraged balance sheet, particularly those in the construction sector, or that have operations tied to the property market, present a higher debt default risk. Higher debt repayment burdens notwithstanding, we do not expect systemic disruption to financial stability in 2023. The BOK's readiness to inject liquidity when market conditions become fraught, and commercial banks' deep capital buffer, will ensure that a systemic crisis in the financial sector will not take place. Harsh economic conditions will bring political repercussions. Policies that give the impression of undercutting people's welfare and increasing income inequality will become more difficult to justify in the public eye. The public will also grow impatient with a ruling party that seems to be more focused on power, struggles, and catering to the demands of a vocal but narrow support base. Consequently, we believe that Yoon Suk-yeol's government will be forced to delay or abandon some of its more divisive policy proposals in 2023. The government's tax reform plans will face the strongest opposition. In 2020, the Ministry of Economy and Finance unveiled a medium-term economic plan that features tax cuts and deregulation to unleash the productive power of the private sector. This includes a proposal to cut the maximum rate of corporate tax from 25% to 22%, the average rate in OECD countries, in addition to reductions in capital gains tax. Since it is only large domestic companies with annual earnings above $232 million are subject to a statutory corporate income tax of 25%, the plan to cut the top corporate tax rate will not be well received by small and medium-sized business owners, who fear that this will further increase the monopolistic power of large conglomerates. Lowering taxes on capital gains will also be unpopular against a backdrop of rising unemployment and falling real value of wage incomes. I, therefore, believe that such proposals will be shelved in 2023. The tax-cutting plans also sit uneasily with the government's emphasis on a return to fiscal prudence in its budget proposal for 2023. Compared with previous years' state budgets, the 2023 proposal was notable for a more conservative allocation of funds to welfare provision and employment support, despite commitments to more targeted fiscal relief for low-income families. I believe that the government's stance will be softened as the economic picture darkens. Through that year, at least one stimulant, supplementary budget will be needed to help household finances and keep small businesses afloat. This will ultimately delay more rapid fiscal consolidation until 2024. In addition to setbacks on the tax and fiscal plans, it is expected public resistance to delay the government's proposals to slow minimum wage growth and allow greater flexibility for businesses to hire and fire employees. Such policies will inflame public anger with the government's inability to protect people's welfare and further instigate antagonism between the government and trade unions. Overall, I expect the government's tax-cutting and deregulation agenda which already faces significant objections by the main opposition Minja party that controls parliament, to be foiled by greater public resistance and economic hardship, despite the fact that Yoon Suk-yeol's administration has not even reached the midpoint of its term. The following is North Korea's nuclear issue on the Korean peninsula. South Korea will also face a more dangerous security environment in 2023, as North Korea's conventional and strategic military threat continues to grow. We expect North Korea to resume nuclear weapons testing in 2023, following intense missile tests, including those of intercontinental ballistic missiles that are capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads, and construction works at its Punggye-ri nuclear test site this year. This will create jitters in South Korea's financial market, moderately increasing capital flight risk and adding depreciatory pressure on the won. North Korea's first nuclear weapons test since 2017 will raise geopolitical tensions in the region and lead to a drastic escalation in inter-Korean hostility. Although we do not expect the US and South Korea to respond to such an event beyond broader economic sanctions and joint military exercises, troops will be mobilized along both sides of the inter-Korean demilitarized zone, raising the risk of miscalculation and crossfire. Given a recent update of North Korea's nuclear policy that allows the use of preemptive nuclear strikes, South Korean authorities are likely to adjust the country's nuclear deterrence strategy. We assign an increasing likelihood to South Korea accepting the deployment of US tactical nuclear weapons on its territory, with a concomitant increase in US troops stationed in South Korea. However, such a move would generate great opposition from China, and this will be the main factor weighing against such a policy change. Another nuclear test will be the final straw that pushes denuclearization on the Korean peninsula through peaceful negotiations off the table for the foreseeable future. I expect the South Korean government to abandon its efforts to offer economic assistance and aid in exchange for North Korea forfeiting its nuclear programs. Instead, it will hasten the pace of defense cooperation and cooperability with the US, with more large-scale joint military exercises to be conducted. Efforts to spark a thaw in relations with Japan will also receive fresh momentum, as bilateral cooperation in intelligence gathering and emergency responses will be needed to prepare, contain and respond to North Korea's military threat. Looking at the surrounding scenery of the road from Seoul to Yeongpyeong, I introduced the points to check in terms of Korean economy and real estate. Next time, I'll be back with a better video. We provide best services with the motto of low cost and trust for foreigners from all over the world who want to purchase real estate such as houses, land, and buildings in Korea. We also provide services for foreigners to settle down, such as real estate investment, immigration, and living services. If you have any further inquiries, please feel free to contact via phone, and I will explain them the best I can. In addition, I also deal with lease service to foreign students residing in South Korea and foreign nationals on short-term residence for business purposes, so I hope to see more interactions in the future.